a lot of people say when they heard that he's dead, so what, because he was never supportive of Ukraine. And nobody knows if he became a president, would he change his stance on Crimea, which is a fundamental issue for Ukrainians, a principal issue as regards to any Russian opposition figure or liberal Russian intellectual. You addressed earlier yourself. So unless Ukraine gets some serious help with weapons, I'm afraid that the consequences of this are going to be very negative.
I mean, it is pretty extraordinary because obviously, despite the enormous losses the Russian army has suffered, they do have this extraordinary weight of numbers. I mean, the Russian sort of fighting doctrine seems to be just throw as many bodies as you can into the battle and ultimately you will prevail.
Absolutely, and this doctrine never changed, and I think it will never change until Putin regime in Russia is going to change. What will happen next, because Russia has presidential elections late March, and of course President Putin is going to win. The worry is that right after the elections, Russian government is going to announce another wave of mobilization, and there are going to be a lot of more people sent to fight with Ukraine. Russia has supremacy in numbers, number one. They do have more weapons now being supplied from North Korea and Iran. And Ukrainians are small in numbers and they don't have weapons. So guess who has the bigger advantage?
It is amazing that the American Congress cannot see the wood for the trees and understand that this is a proxy war for the Iranians and the North Koreans as well. Tell me, the tragic death of Alexei Navalny last week, how has that been marked in Ukraine? What are people saying about that?
Well, Alexei Navalny was never a popular figure in Ukraine because right after Russia annexed Crimea in 2013, he actually referred to it as Crimea is not a sandwich, quote unquote. You cannot take it and give it back. So right after that phrase of his, he became a very unpopular figure in Ukraine. The Ukrainian segment is divided. A lot of people say when they heard that he's dead, so what, because he was never supportive of Ukraine. And nobody knows if he became a president, would he change his stance on Crimea, which is a fundamental issue for Ukrainians, a principal issue as regards to any Russian opposition figure or liberal Russian intellectual. Some people actually, very few, I have to say, the minority expressed regret and sent their condolences to the family. But a lot of people were disappointed that Yulia Navalny, now widow of Alexei Navalny, never mentioned Ukraine once in her public speeches. So, also a sense of concern for the Ukrainian public about her.
Well, that is fascinating. I'm glad I asked the question because obviously I knew that Navalny was a complicated figure. And of course, we know that, back in the day, he would march with the far right and was a Russian nationalist. And obviously he's been venerated, quite rightly, for his bravery in standing up to Vladimir Putin. But I wasn't aware that he was a complicated or indeed a figure treated with some hostility by the Ukrainian people. The other thing that's been happening recently in Ukraine is obviously Zelensky has changed some of the military leadership. What is kind of Zelensky's standing now with the people of Ukraine? Because you always get the impression, to a certain extent, that things are not as smooth as they might appear. Again, it's a complicated picture. It's not a sort of Churchill war leader, nor indeed was Churchill universally backed even during the Second World War. Presumably it's more nuanced in terms of the public's perception of Zelensky.
Yes, the public perception of Zelensky has changed dramatically in Ukraine. His popularity ratings fell down considerably because of, no successes in the front line, and also because there's no real breakthrough in fight against corruption. Things are working quite badly in when it comes to the regional administrations, the city administrations. There is a lot of problems over there. And most importantly, Valery Zaluzhny, his former chief of staff, was extremely and still extremely popular figure. So removing him and replacing him with a less popular general made a lot of people feel very, very concerned. And it's a very difficult situation in Ukraine in terms of internal politics, because unless something happened on the front line, Zelensky's ratings are gonna fall and fall and fall. He does still have some support within the Ukrainian public, but I don't think he can hold it on for a longer time unless some sort of miracle happen in terms of the fight against corruption, which is the major concern for the Ukrainian public, because there's no proper investigations on corruption cases. And of course, if there are going to be no breakthrough in the front line, to the Ukrainian advantage.
And what lay behind kind of Zelensky's reshuffle? Why did he remove a popular chief of staff?
Well, we will never know the real reason until Zelensky spells it out himself or Zaluzhny spells it out, but both sides never really commented on that properly. The wide rumor and suggestion within the people I speak to, and this within the army personnel and etc., they thought they 100%, not 100%, maybe the majority supported Zaluzhny very much, because Zaluzhny is widely respected person, an officer because unlike current chief of staff Syrsky, he never studied in Russia.
Oh, right.
Yes, he never did. He's a proper Ukrainian general who has a NATO training and American training. He speaks fantastic English. You know, he is very well respected figure. So replacing him with someone who actually spent the beginning, at least, of his military career in Russia is very suspicious. Also, let me tell you something, that Syrsky's new chief of staff's family, like his parents, live in Russia. So that is also a point of concern. Why Zelensky removed Zaluzhny? The popular opinion says that probably he felt threatened by Zaluzhny's grazing popularity is against his falling down ratings. This could be the case because Syrsky is no equal to Zaluzhny, to be honest, and that's a huge disappointment that he changed his chief of staff right now when the situation is so bad.
It's odd to think about your kind of popularity at a time like this. I mean, Israel has a national government at the moment, but obviously people are chafing at the bit to get rid of Benjamin Netanyahu when the right moment arrives. Is there there are presidential rivals to Zelensky? Are there any elections planned, or how do the kind of presidential rivals conduct themselves? Who are they? The people most likely to take over from Zelensky, and when would that moment come?
Well, like many countries, about 70 countries in the world who are supposed to have elections this year, Ukraine should have had elections in May this year, presidential elections. However, it's not happening because of the war. And also because for Zelensky at the moment to call for elections is not really a good sign, because he's going to lose. His rivals are, first of all, the president of Ukraine who was before him, Petro Poroshenko, who has clearly didn't forget his presidential ambitions, and he's doing everything possible to be on the public eye. He brings some weapons to the army. He is more popular on Twitter now, and all the formerly Twitter, now X, and etc. etc. A lot of people predict that Zaluzhny, Valery Zaluzhny, might run if elections are announced, though Zaluzhny himself never commented on it. No, neither people who are around him. So it's not clear who exactly is going to oppose Zelensky if presidential elections are to happen, but it is very and very unlikely. Because also remember that about so many millions of Ukrainians, 11 million or so, are abroad across the world, the people who run from the war, women, children, and some men. How are they going to vote? The system is not planned. It's not, there is no infrastructure to conduct elections in a situation like this.
How interesting. I can't let you leave without obviously talking about the work that you've been doing in terms of your documentary. You've documented these kidnapped children, and the kind of astonishing thing when you watch your documentaries is learning, for example, some of these children were completely indoctrinated, told that their parents had abandoned them and that Russia had saved them. They were made to sing Russian songs. You had a first interview with Maria Lvova-Belova, the Russian Commissioner for Children's Rights, who's since been indicted in the International Criminal Court. What is the latest in terms of this extraordinary kind of I was going to say sub-story, but adjacent story to the war, this kidnapping of Ukrainian children by the Russians.
Right. A few more children came back. I mean, were returned by the Russians, but not a lot. At the moment, the figure stands about 408, which is nothing compared to thousands and thousands of children who are still in Russia. In terms of my film, one boy, he actually decided to stay in Russia, and we were not sure whether he did it willingly or he was under pressure. Well, the good news is that he actually left Russia 2 weeks ago, and he is at the moment in the third country, waiting for his Ukrainian documents to come through, and then he's going to go to Germany and reunite with his grandmother. So this is a success story, which shows again, no matter how much Russia is going to brainwash the children and conduct its propaganda purposes and threaten them, when opportunity comes, these kids are running away. The government of Qatar is involved now in negotiation between Russians and the Ukrainians in return of the children, but it's a very, very difficult process. It takes months to negotiate the return. So there is no proper legal mechanism to return children. Everything is happening ad hoc, and this is not the way to go forward.